The shuttle bay doors groaned open, and Cole Maddox stepped onto the polished deck of Varanthe Fleet Academy with nothing but a regulation duffel and a set of orders he hadn't asked for. Around him, cadets moved in disciplined clusters. Most of them stood a full head taller than he did. Some had chitinous plating that caught the corridor lights in shades of slate and copper. Others had forearms folded in parade rest, their secondary eyes tracking him before their primary set even turned. A few had no visible eyes at all, navigating by sonar clicks that bounced off the walls in rhythms Cole could feel in his teeth. He was the only human in the intake line. The Varanthe officer at the registration desk paused when Cole presented his biometric ident. The officer was Seathrani, tall and whip-thin, with 3 jointed fingers and skin like brushed aluminum. His nostrils, vertical slits along his jaw, flared twice before he spoke. Cadet Maddox, Terran designation. The officer looked past Cole as though expecting a second figure, a handler, an escort. You are alone. That's correct. The officer's secondary nostrils flared again. Cole had read that this meant surprise, or perhaps mild disgust. The briefing packet had been thin on the difference. Barracks 9, Tier 2. Your cohort assignment will display on your compad within the hour. Do not enter any training chamber without authorization. Cole picked up his duffel and walked. The corridors of Varanthe stretched in wide arcs, curved in ways that followed the station's rotational architecture. The floors were a pale composite that absorbed footsteps. The walls held recessed hollow panels showing the Academy's crest, its founding cycle date, and a rotating list of alumni honors. None of the names were human. None of the species listed were from Sol. Barracks 9 was a long chamber with sleep pods arranged in vertical stacks of 3. The pod assigned to him was the lowest, nearest the floor drain. The padding inside was firm and too short for most of the species here, but about right for him. He stowed his duffel, sat on the edge of the pod, and waited. No one spoke to him. 3 cadets entered the barracks over the next 20 minutes. 2 were vrelid, compact and muscular, with ridged exoskeletons and jaw mandibles that clicked when they talked. The third was a Kaylori, nearly 2 meters tall, with smooth violet skin and wide-set amber eyes that blinked laterally. The Kaylori glanced at Cole once, then looked away with a slow roll of both eyelids that Cole took to mean something between curiosity and pity. The compad on Cole's wrist buzzed. Cohort 12, competitive track, Crucible qualifier in 6 standard days. He read it twice. The Crucible was the event he'd been told about, the one the brass back on Earth had mentioned in the same breath as the phrase, prove something. Every incoming class at Varanthe was funneled through an initial qualifier. Top performers were placed in command tracks. Bottom performers were reassigned to support billets, or, in the case of species without treaty standing, sent home. Humans had treaty standing. Barely. The ink on the Terran-conquered accession pact was less than 2 years dry. Cole was the first human admitted to Varanthe's competitive track, not the first to apply. The first they'd accepted. He spent the next 4 days doing what he'd done for the past 6 years of his life. He trained. The Academy's training chambers were open access between scheduled drills. Cole showed up at the start of the first open block and stayed until the last. The chambers were designed for species with different gravity tolerances, different limb counts, different metabolic baselines. The resistance frames could be recalibrated for Terran physiology, but only roughly, and the calibration took time that nobody offered to help with. Cole figured it out himself, adjusted the grips, rewired the tension bands to account for his hand structure, ran the endurance circuits at Terran standard gravity instead of the lighter default. On the second day, a vrelid named Sorek stopped at the edge of the endurance track and watched Cole run laps. Sorek's mandibles clicked twice. You train longer than anyone in Cohort 12. I train the amount I train. You also train alone. Cole kept running. Sorek watched for another 30 seconds, then left. On the fourth day, the Crucible parameters were posted. Cole read them on the barracks hollow panel alongside the rest of Cohort 12. There were 31 cadets in the cohort. Cole was the smallest by a significant margin. The Crucible was a 5-stage sequential competition. Each stage tested a different domain. Cadets were scored individually, and the cumulative total determined placement. The stages were: Stage 1, Navigation. A simulated hostile terrain crossing under time pressure. Obstacles randomized per entrant. Completion time and route efficiency scored. Stage 2, Tactical Assembly. Disassemble, modify, and reassemble a standard-issue Concord field kit under instructor observation. Accuracy, speed, and improvisation scored. Stage 3, Endurance Circuit. A physical trial scaling across multiple gravity zones, temperature shifts, and atmospheric variances. Duration scored. Stage 4, Combat Proficiency. A single opponent sparring bout bracketed by species weight class. Full contact. First to 3 points or incapacitation. Stage 5, Command Decision. A live-fire simulation requiring real-time tactical judgment with simulated casualties. Score derived from outcome, cost, and decision speed. The posting drew the usual murmur. Cadets compared the stages to their strengths. The Vrelid pair from Cole's barracks both favored the combat round. The Kailori was confident about navigation. Her species had spatial mapping organs in their skulls. A Drathiki cadet with 6 limbs and compound eyes was already talking about tactical assembly, as though the stage were designed for him. No one asked Cole what he favored. That was fine. The morning of the Crucible arrived with a low-frequency tone that rolled through Barracks 9 at 400 station time. Cole was already awake. He'd been awake for 40 minutes, sitting on the edge of his pod, running through the obstacle parameters one more time in his head. He dressed in the standard-issue trial suit. It fit poorly across the shoulders. The suit had been cut for a species with wider clavicles and shorter arms. He adjusted the straps manually, cinching them tight until the suit moved with him instead of against him. Cohort 12 assembled in the staging area at 4:30. The room was a wide oval, ringed with observation galleries. Instructors occupied the upper tier, their console stations glowing pale blue. Cole counted 9 of them. The lead proctor was a Varanthi officer named Hallant, heavyset by Seathrani standards, with deep creases along his aluminum skin and a voice that carried without effort. Cadets, the Crucible is not a test of your best qualities. It is a test of your worst. Every stage is designed to find the point where you fail. You will be scored on how far past that point you continue. He paused. His vertical nostrils flared once slowly. Some of you have trained your entire developmental cycles for this. Some of you come from species with biological advantages in one or more domains. That is irrelevant. The Crucible does not care what you are. It cares what you do. His gaze passed over Cole without stopping. Stage 1 began at 500. The navigation course loaded into Cole's visor as he stepped into the sim chamber. The terrain was a fractured ridgeline, steep angles, loose substrate, visibility dropping to near zero at intervals. Wind shear modeled at gusts strong enough to knock a Vrelid sideways. Temperature oscillating between extremes designed to tax thermal regulation implants most species had. Cole didn't have thermal regulation implants. He had a jacket he'd packed at the bottom of his duffel, a wool blend underlayer from Earth that the packing checklist hadn't mentioned, because the packing checklist had been written for species that regulated their own core temperature. He put the jacket on under his trial suit. The sim registered it as unauthorized equipment for 0.3 seconds, then reclassified it as personal garment, non-restricted. Cole started climbing. The ridgeline was designed to reward height and wingspan. The handholds were spaced for longer limbs. The ledges were narrow, meant for digitigrade feet with better grip ratios. Cole's flat-footed, five-toed stance was wrong for every surface. He adapted, used friction differently. Jammed his forearm into a crevice where a Kalori would have used a single, elongated finger. Braced his back against one wall and his boots against the opposite face, chimneying through a section that the simulation clearly expected to be navigated with a running leap. It was slower, but it worked. He came out of stage 1 ranked 19th out of 31. Not fast, not last. The Kalori, as expected, finished first, her spatial mapping organs turning every obstacle into a geometry problem she'd already solved. The Vrelid pair finished 6th and 8th. Sarek, the one who'd watched Cole train, finished 11th. Cole checked his time, 7 minutes slower than the median. He noted it, discarded the frustration, and moved to stage 2. Tactical assembly was held in a brightly lit workshop bay. Each cadet received an identical field kit, a Concord standard multispectral scanner, a hard-seal breach patch, a collapsible signal booster, and a plasma-fed cutting tool. The kit was unfamiliar to most first-cycle cadets, regardless of species. That was the point. The instructions were simple. Disassemble the scanner. Modify its frequency range to detect Crethori biosignatures instead of standard hull fractures. Reassemble it. Then integrate the modified scanner with the signal booster to create a functional tracking relay. Time limit 40 minutes. Cole picked up the scanner, turned it over, found the seam lines. His hands were smaller than the tool was designed for, but his fingers were dexterous in ways that the Concord designers hadn't planned around. He could reach internal components that required a Vrelid to use a secondary mandible tool. He could hold 2 microconnectors simultaneously in one hand, something the 6-limbed Drathiki could do easily, but that gave the Cthrani, with their rigid 3-jointed fingers, real trouble. He worked steadily, no wasted motion, no consulting the reference holo more than twice. On Earth, he'd spent 4 years in a machine shop before the military, rebuilding engine components for cargo haulers in the Pacific Northwest. The tools were different. The principles weren't. He finished in 26 minutes. The proctor assigned to his station, a junior instructor named Velis, walked over and inspected the assembly. Velis was Kalori, her amber eyes blinking laterally as she ran the diagnostic. Functional full-spectrum match. Integration confirmed. She paused. You completed this ahead of several cadets with tool-native anatomies. Cole didn't answer. He was already cleaning his workspace. He left stage 2 ranked 8th. The Drathiki finished first. 2 Cthrani cadets tied for second. Sarek finished 14th, his mandibles clicking in what Cole now recognized as frustration. Stage 3 was the one Cole had been waiting for. The endurance circuit was held in the Academy's environmental chamber, a massive cylindrical space that could simulate any combination of gravity, temperature, atmosphere, and terrain. The chamber cycled through 12 zones. Each zone increased 1 variable: gravity in the first 4, temperature extremes in the next 4, atmospheric density in the last 4. The goal was simple: keep moving. Every zone you completed counted. The moment your biometrics hit a safety threshold, the chamber pulled you out. Most species had a biological wall somewhere in the 12 zones. The Kalori, with their elegant physiology, typically crashed in the high-gravity zones. Their skeletal structure wasn't built for sustained load-bearing above 1.4 standard. The Vrelid held through gravity but suffered in temperature extremes. Their exoskeletons conducted heat with punishing efficiency. The Cthrani did well in cold, but their cardiovascular systems spiked under atmospheric pressure changes. Humans had no single catastrophic weakness in any of the 12 zones. They also had no single outstanding strength. What humans had was a metabolic architecture that degraded gradually instead of catastrophically. A human didn't hit a wall. A human just got slower. Cole entered Zone 1 at a steady jog. By Zone 4, the gravity was 1.6 standard, 3 cadets had already been pulled. Cole's legs burned. His joints ached. He kept the same pace. Zone 5 dropped the temperature to -40. 2 more cadets triggered safety pulls. Cole's wool underlayer, the one from his duffel, absorbed the cold without conducting it to his skin. He ran. Zone 7 raised the temperature to 58 degrees. A Vrelid cadet stumbled and went down hard, his exoskeleton plates separating at the joints from thermal expansion. Cole slowed his pace by 8%, redirected his breathing through his nose, and let his body's evaporative cooling do what 60 million years of evolution on a world with open savannas had built it to do. He sweated. The system flagged it as a biometric anomaly. No other species in the chamber was leaking fluid from their skin. The chamber's monitoring AI queried the Proctor station twice. Proctor Hallant, watching from the observation gallery, noted the queries and dismissed them. The human's thermoregulatory system is functioning as designed. Continue the trial. Zone 9, atmospheric pressure at 2.3 standard. Cole's breathing grew labored. His vision narrowed at the edges. 14 cadets had been pulled by now. 17 remained. Zone 10, gravity at 1.9, temperature at -22, atmospheric pressure holding at 2.3. Cole's pace dropped to a walk. His muscles screamed. His lungs burned. He kept walking. Zone 11. By now, only 9 cadets remained. Cole was one of them. Sarek was another, the Vrelid grinding forward on sheer stubbornness, his mandibles locked tight against his jaw. The Drathiki was still moving, all 6 limbs working in a rolling gait that looked agonized but effective. Zone 12 activated. Gravity at 2.1 standard. Temperature cycling between -30 and +50 in 90-second intervals. Atmospheric pressure at 2.6. The air tasted like copper and iron. Cole's ears popped. His heartbeat was visible in his vision, a rhythmic pulse at the edges. 4 more cadets dropped. Their biometric thresholds triggered in rapid sequence, the chamber pulling them with gentle but firm force fields that deposited them on the medical platforms outside. 5 cadets remained. Cole, Sarek, the Drathiki, a massive Gorathi cadet whose stone-dense musculature made him nearly immune to gravity but who was visibly suffering from the temperature swings, and a Pelori cadet, slender and whip-quick, whose species had evolved on a high-pressure world and was handling the atmosphere better than anyone. Cole's pace was a shuffle now. Each step took deliberate effort. His legs felt like they were encased in wet concrete. The wool underlayer was soaked with sweat that was alternately freezing and boiling against his skin. He didn't stop. The Gorathi went down at the 4-minute mark of Zone 12, biometric pull. The Pelori lasted another 90 seconds. Then his pressure advantage plateaued and the gravity caught him. Biometric pull. 3 remained, Cole, Sarek, and the Drathiki. Sarek's mandibles were fully extended now, a Vrelid stress response that exposed the secondary breathing vents along his jaw. He was pulling air through every available opening. His pace was slower than Cole's. The Drathiki's 6-limbed gait had collapsed into 4. 2 of his legs dragged behind him, limp. He was crawling on 4 arms. Cole walked. At the 6-minute mark of Zone 12, Sarek's biometrics triggered. The Vrelid collapsed to one knee and the chamber caught him. He went out clicking, mandibles snapping a staccato rhythm that Cole suspected was profanity. 2 left, Cole and the Drathiki. The Drathiki stopped. His compound eyes, normally a bright emerald mosaic, had gone dull. He looked at Cole. Cole looked back. The Drathiki lowered his head, biometric pull. Cole stood alone in Zone 12. His legs shook. His breathing was ragged. The chamber's monitoring AI queried the Proctor station a 3rd time. Proctor Hallant's voice came through the chamber's audio system, stripped of inflection. Cadet Maddox, Zone 12 complete. You may exit the circuit. Cole walked out under his own power. In the observation gallery, Proctor Hallant made a notation on his console. He did not share it with the other instructors. He didn't need to. They had all watched. The notation read, Cadet completed all 12 zones. First Terran to do so. Third non-Pelori to do so in the past 11 cycles. Stage 4 arrived 4 hours later, after a recovery period that Cole spent sitting against the barracks wall, eating a ration bar and drinking water in slow, measured sips. His muscles had stiffened. He stretched methodically, working through a routine he'd learned from a sergeant back on Earth who had said, simply, if you can still move, you're not done. The combat round was bracketed by species weight class, but within each bracket, matchups were randomized. Cole drew a Cthrani cadet named Dren, taller than Cole by a full head, with the 3-jointed arms that gave his species an extended striking range, and the aluminum-hard skin that absorbed blunt impact like armor plating. The sparring circle was an 8-meter disc, padded at the edges, with scoring sensors embedded in the floor. First to 3 points. Points awarded for clean strikes to designated target zones. Incapacitation was an automatic win. Dren opened with a sweeping arm strike, using the full extension of his 3-jointed reach. The blow was fast, technically sound, and aimed at Cole's upper chest. Cole stepped inside the arc. The strike whistled past his shoulder. He drove his fist into the unplatted gap below Dren's jaw, where the Cthrani vertical nostrils sat. The impact registered before Dren's arm completed its follow-through. 1 point. Dren recalibrated. The nostrils he used for respiration weren't a typical target, but the sensor grid didn't distinguish between conventional and unconventional. A clean strike was a clean strike. The second exchange was longer. Dren tested Cole's footwork with feints and low sweeps, trying to use his height and reach advantage. Cole moved with economy, no wasted steps, no unnecessary motion. He'd learned to fight against bigger opponents on Earth, in gyms and on base, where every sparring partner outweighed him, and the ones who taught him best were the ones who never let him forget it. Dren landed a clean strike to Cole's ribs at the 90-second mark, 1-1. Cole answered with a combination that used Dren's own reach against him. When Dren extended for a jab, Cole trapped the middle joint of his arm, used the rigid 3-joint structure as a lever, and redirected Dren's momentum into a controlled fall. As Dren hit the mat, Cole placed a measured strike on the back of his neck. The scoring sensor registered it. 2-1. Dren stood. His vertical nostrils flared in what Cole now understood clearly as anger. The Cthrani dropped his center of gravity and charged, abandoning technique for mass and speed. Cole sidestepped. It was a small movement, precise, the kind of evasion that came from 10,000 repetitions in a training hall where the instruction was always the same. Don't be where the hit lands. Dren's charge carried him 2 steps past Cole. Cole pivoted and delivered a short, sharp kick to the back of Dren's knee. The Cthrani's leg buckled. He went down. Cole stepped forward, placed his open palm on Dren's shoulder, and held it there while the scoring sensor confirmed. 3-1 match. Dren looked up at Cole from the mat. His nostrils worked silently for several seconds. You fight without excess, Dren said. I fight the way I was taught. Who taught you? People who lost and learned from it. Cole offered his hand. Dren looked at it, and Cole could see the moment the Cthrani recognized the gesture for what it was. Not dominance, acknowledgement. Dren took the hand and stood. Stage 4 rankings put Cole at 3rd. Only the Gorathi, whose stone-dense body made the combat round a formality, and a Pelori who fought with a fluid speed that bordered on prescient, placed above him. His cumulative standing after 4 stages was 7th out of 31. Not first, but no one in the observation gallery was looking at first place. Stage 5, the command decision. The simulation chamber, reconfigured itself into a tactical bridge. Each cadet entered alone, the scenario loaded on screens that curved around the room in a 270-degree arc. The situation was a convoy defense, 6 transport vessels carrying civilian evacuees through a contested corridor, 2 hostile contacts inbound, limited defensive assets, a comm relay that was failing, a civilian vessel with engine trouble falling behind the formation. Time to first engagement, 4 minutes. The scoring criteria were projected on a secondary display. Outcome weight, 40%. Cost weight, 30%. Decision speed, 30%. Cole studied the board for 12 seconds. Then he started giving orders. He didn't try to save everything. That was the trap. The simulation was designed so that a cadet who tried to protect all 6 transports, repair the comm relay, and engage both hostiles simultaneously would lose on every metric. The decision tree branched into 100 paths, and 93 of them led to catastrophic failure because the cadets spread their assets too thin chasing a perfect outcome. Cole made the hard call. He designated the engine-troubled transport as unsavable within the current tactical window and redirected its passengers to the nearest functional vessel via emergency shuttle transfer. He allocated defensive assets to the 5 remaining transports in a staggered formation that gave each vessel overlapping coverage. He routed the comm relay's remaining bandwidth to a single emergency frequency, instead of trying to maintain full-spectrum communication. When the hostile contacts arrived, his formation was ready. The engagement was ugly and short. 1 defensive platform was destroyed. The transferred passengers from the troubled transport survived. 5 of the 6 original vessels reached the corridor exit. The 6th, the one with the engine trouble, was captured by the simulation's hostiles after its crew evacuated. Cole noted the loss on the tactical summary without expression. The simulation ended. The scoring matrix populated. Outcome: 87% of civilian lives preserved, above the 80% threshold that the simulation's designers had calibrated as optimal realistic. Cost: 1 defensive platform, 1 empty transport hull, below the median cost projection. Decision speed: 12 seconds to initial order, fastest in Cohort 12 by a margin of 41 seconds. Overall Stage 5 rank, first. The proctors in the observation gallery reviewed the results in silence. Proctor Hallant pulled up Cole's full run on his console. 5 stages: 19th, 8th, 1st, 3rd, 1st. A trajectory that started at the bottom and climbed without stopping. Hallant ran the cumulative calculation. The algorithm weighted each stage equally, then applied modifiers for consistency, trajectory, and the gap between biological expectation and actual performance. That last modifier had been added to the scoring 3 cycles ago, after a Varanthi statistical review found that raw scores disadvantaged species with fewer innate advantages. The modifier was supposed to level the field. For Cole, it didn't just level the field, it detonated the curve. His biological baseline was the lowest in Cohort 12. The expected performance for a Terran, based on the Concord's physiological database, had been calculated before the Crucible began. The database predicted he would wash out in Stage 3. It predicted he would place in the bottom quartile overall. It predicted his combat round would be a single-point loss. The database had been wrong on every count. The modified cumulative score placed Cole Maddox second in Cohort 12. Second overall, behind only the Drathiki, whose 6-limbed versatility had given him strong performances across all 5 stages. Hallant stared at the number. Then he looked at the raw biological advantage modifiers and ran the calculation without them, just to see what the unmodified score looked like. Without the modifier, Cole placed 4th, still command track, still above 27 cadets with biological advantages he didn't share. Hallant closed the console. The results were posted in the staging area at 1800 hours, 31 names, 31 cumulative scores. The top 10 were marked for command track placement. Cole's name sat at number 2. The room was quiet in a way that Cole hadn't experienced at Varanthe before. Not hostile quiet, not dismissive quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when a room full of beings who measured the world by biological capacity encountered a result that didn't fit the framework. Sarek was the first to speak. The Vrelid had placed 15th, solidly mid-pack, respectable. His mandibles clicked in a slow, deliberate pattern. You finished the endurance circuit. I did. All 12 zones. Yes. My species has a phrase for what you did. It doesn't translate well. The closest meaning is the one who walks when running is no longer possible. Cole nodded. We have a phrase too. What is it? We call it Tuesday. Sarek's mandibles stopped clicking. Then they started again, faster, in a pattern Cole hadn't heard before. It took him a moment to realize the Vrelid was laughing. The Kailori from Cole's barracks, the one who had looked at him with what he'd read as pity on the first day, approached the results board and stood next to him. She had placed 12th. Her navigation score had been the highest in the cohort, but the endurance circuit had dropped her hard. You were the smallest in every stage, she said. I was. You had no biological advantage in any domain. That's been pointed out. And you placed second. Cole looked at the board, his name, the number beside it. He let himself feel it for exactly 3 seconds, the weight of it, what it meant, what it had cost to get here, the years in the machine shop, the years in uniform, the months of bureaucratic fights to get the application accepted, the shuttle ride where he'd been the only human in a vessel built for species that saw him as a novelty at best. 3 seconds, then he put it away. I placed where I placed. The Kailori blinked laterally, both eyelids sweeping in the same direction. My name is Tessaro. I think Cohort 12 is fortunate to have you. Cole, and the cohort hasn't seen anything yet. Proctor Hallant descended from the observation gallery at 1830 hours. He moved through the staging area without ceremony, reviewing the board with a face that gave nothing away. He stopped beside Cole. Cadet Maddox. Proctor. Your performance in Stage 5, the command simulation. You abandoned the 6th transport within 12 seconds of the scenario loading. I triaged. The engine trouble transport was unsavable within the asset window. Attempting to save, it would have degraded coverage for the other 5. The optimal decision was to evacuate its passengers and accept the hull loss. Hallant's nostrils flared slowly. 14 cadets attempted to save all 6. All 14 lost more than 30% of the civilian complement. 3 lost the entire convoy. I'm aware that trying to save everything is how you lose everything. Hallant studied him. The Cthrani Proctor had graded hundreds of cadets across dozens of cycles. He had seen talent, seen raw biological superiority, seen species whose neural architecture made tactical calculation as natural as breathing. What he had not seen, not often, was a cadet who understood cost, who made the hard decision fast, without hesitation, without apology, and lived with the number afterward. The modified scoring accounts for your species' physiological baseline. Without it, you would place 4th. I know. You know, Hallant's gaze was steady, and yet you are not troubled by the modifier. The modifier exists because the scoring system was built for species that aren't mine. I performed within the system I was given. If the system thinks my biology should have produced a lower result, that's the system's problem, not mine. Hallant's nostrils closed, then opened again. The slow, deliberate rhythm that Cole now understood was the Cthrani equivalent of a nod. Report to Command Track Orientation, 600 tomorrow, Barracks 1. Barracks 1 is Officer Cadet Housing. I'm aware of what Barracks 1 is, Cadet. Cole picked up his duffel for the second time since arriving at Varanthe. This time, the walk was different, not because the corridors were any less curved, not because the hollow panels showed anything new, but because the cadets he passed looked at him differently. Not with pity, not with curiosity, not with the lateral blink of novelty. They looked at him the way you look at someone who belongs somewhere you assumed they couldn't. He passed Sorek in the corridor outside Barracks 9. The Vrelid was leaning against the wall, arms folded across his ridged chest. Barracks 1. Barracks 1. Sorek's mandibles clicked once. The Crucible is the first trial. There will be harder ones. I know. You don't seem concerned. Cole adjusted the strap of his duffel. Concerned isn't the same as unprepared. He walked. Behind him, in the observation gallery that was now empty, Proctor Hallant sat alone at his console. The results of Cohort 12's Crucible were finalized, locked, and archived. In 32 cycles of administering the qualifier, Hallant had seen 4 cadets complete all 12 zones of the endurance circuit. He had seen 1 cadet achieve first place in the command simulation on their first attempt with 0 prior conquered tactical training. He had never seen the same cadet do both. Hallant opened the Academy's Species Performance Database. The Terran entry was sparse: physiological data, gravity tolerance, atmospheric range, dietary requirements, cognitive benchmarks from limited sample sets. A note at the bottom, added by whoever had processed the original Terran accession packet, read, "Species demonstrates broad but unremarkable adaptability. No domain-specific advantages. Recommended track, support, and logistics." Hallant read the note, then he opened the edit function. He deleted the note. In its place, he wrote a single line: reassess all prior assumptions regarding Terran performance ceilings. Sample data insufficient. He saved the file and closed the console. Down in Barracks 1, Cole Maddox set his duffel on a pod that was the right height, in a room where the air smelled like polished composite and fresh laundry protocols. He sat on the edge, as he had 6 days ago, in a pod that had been too close to the floor drain. But he didn't sit the same way. 6 days ago he had sat and waited. Now he sat and knew. Not knew that he was better than the others. He wasn't. The Drathiki had beaten him. The Gorathi was stronger. The Pelori was faster. The Kalori could navigate spaces he'd need a map and a compass to cross. Sorek had a stubbornness that matched his own. What Cole knew was simpler than that, and harder. He knew he'd been measured by a system that hadn't been built for him, on a station that hadn't wanted him, in a cohort that hadn't expected him. And he'd walked every step of it without asking anyone to make it easier. That was the thing they didn't have a file on, not endurance, not combat proficiency, not tactical acumen. Pride, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't announce itself, doesn't demand recognition, doesn't need the room to agree. The kind that walks into Zone 12 when every cell in the body says stop and keeps walking because stopping was never the point. The point was being there, finishing, standing up when it was done and looking the result in the eye without flinching, whether the number was second or 31st. Cole Maddox lay back in his pod and closed his eyes. Tomorrow the real work began. He'd be ready. He was always ready. That was the whole point.